all come together September 13th. How massive is that for boxing and UFC to have that joining relationship?
It is absolutely enormous. For Dana White to sort of now put his fingers on this initiative, I think is going to be enormous. Humbly as a member of our UFC live production team, I feel like there's things that we can do to sort of help elevate boxing, at least from a television perspective. I'm absolutely thrilled to get this opportunity. I covered boxing from 2002 to 2008. I've been doing the mixed martial arts thing for a while, but the responsibility of calling this fight is not lost on me, and I will be spending much of my August and September making sure I am the most prepared play-by-play man in the history of the sport.
For years, we've heard Dana take shots at boxing and how the sport has faded, for whatever reason he may be speaking on. Now that he's venturing into it, what talks have you had with him in terms of what he's looking to do to resurrect the sport?
Well, I think there are wide-ranging conversations that potentially could be had. Even my broadcast partner, Max Kellerman, I think is bullish about some of the things that can be done in terms of changing rules to actually make the sport more ingested for people. One thing that I would say, and said repeatedly when I was a boxing journalist, when boxing's at its best, no sport touches it. But how do you get boxing to consistently be at its best? And I think it's less holding, it's less clinching, right? Even in mixed martial arts, that's a big part of our sport that is off-putting to people when there's extended clinch situations and the referee is not breaking the fighters up. So I think that eventually, long-term or short-term, there's ways to actually affect change when it comes to the rule set. But I think really in terms of Dana, it's about putting on the fights that people want to see, making sure that matchups don't get away from you, and elevating the whole live production. And hopefully we can do that September 13th.
He talked about getting away from pay-per-view and using streaming services like Netflix. I remember watching your boxing here in Las Vegas at the Hilton and be on ABC's Wide World of Sports in the 70s, right? And you get free boxing matches. There's no such thing as pay-per-view. Does he want to take it to that level at some point?
I don't have any informed speculation on that, but as you see the UFC broadcast television deal being negotiated, and who knows if it'll be split or will end up in one piece, but Netflix is a destination that a lot of people are able to access globally, and that doesn't necessarily apply to some of these other streaming platforms. So one-stop shopping, 300 million people can go on Netflix and watch this event. So yes, I think for people like you and me who grew up watching boxing on ABC, it was the only thing on in the house, whether you liked it or not, it would certainly be nice to not have to go through the rigmarole of trying to pay for the fights and do all those things and make it be in one place. But, I do think the UFC television contract is going to be telling as far as what the future holds for boxing and TKO.
Do you think that a lot of times Dana said the boxing is so fragmented, boxing was so and now, do you have trust in Dana White that he can fix boxing?
Yes, I think it's an ambitious endeavor, right, to think that you can come in and in a short amount of time actually fix some of the things in this sport that have made it maybe a little bit imperfect over the last few years. It's not as though MMA is in this perfect place, right? There's still constantly things that the UFC is doing to affect change as far as that sport is concerned. Major League Baseball made the bases bigger a couple of years ago.
And the clock.
Yeah,
and the clock.
The clock, right? I do think, though, there are ways to make these sports not just more ingestible on television, but just in terms of the overall masses being able to understand what exactly is going on. We have, more often than not, one UFC lightweight champion. There might be an interim there, but even as the play-by-play announcer, as I try to give context to this fight, you're not going to hear me run through all the different belts that Canelo Álvarez is putting on the line, because what does that really mean to people? So how much can you clean up some of that? I don't really know. But if any man can affect major change as far as taking a sport to that requisite next level, even a sport with a rich history like boxing, it's my boss, Dana White.
When you think about the history of boxing in Las Vegas, going back to the outdoor stadium at Caesars, and once the MGM Grand was built, so on and so forth, where does this match rank?
It's as good as it gets. I covered Oscar De La Hoya versus Floyd Mayweather. I never thought a live event could get bigger than that one, but I was the boxing journalist who was getting excited about Robbie Peeble fighting Marco Antonio Barrera. I'm making a case for Rocky Juarez back in '04 to beat Marco, So I think sometimes I'm a little bit too insulated, and I just get very excited about all of these fights. But yes, I believe singularly this is the biggest fight of the last quarter century. And oftentimes when you get a super fight, you may have two Hall of Fame type fighters, but they're not smack dab in the middle of their fighting primes, or one fighter is way too removed from their fighting prime. Yeah, Terence Crawford's going to be 38 years old 2 weeks after this fight, but these fighters are close to, if not in their fighting prime, and I think that only elevates what we're going to see September 13th.
In the past,
Las Vegas becoming going from being the fight capital to what it is now, and you see all of the massive sports coming to this town, and then now this at least.
Yeah.
Just how grand is that?
It's amazing. It's always been the entertainment mecca. It's always been the fight capital of the world. Even as a UFC employee, I kind of took issue when we were calling Yaz Island, Abu Dhabi, the fight capital of the world. This is the fight capital. This is where every boxer and mixed martial arts athlete wants to compete. But yeah, to see the town blow up to the extent at which it has in terms of the sports world. I lived in Summerlin in 2011, 2012, and man, the game has changed a lot since I left town in 2014. So it's exciting. It's a great town, and it deserves every bit of the shine.
In the past, boxing fans hate MMA, MMA fans hate boxing. Do you see that the frontiers are erasing? Do you see that they're closing down?
Yeah, I don't necessarily see it that way. I do think there was a time in my life as a young boxing journalist when I saw this mixed martial arts avalanche and I didn't know what to do with it, and I think at times I started being critical of MMA as a boxing defender. But both sports can coexist, and I don't know that that's really lost on anyone. I just think that it's about making the sports as good as humanly possible, making it as conceptually simplistic enough for people to understand, and then the fighters take care of the rest, But I haven't been able to immerse myself in boxing as much just because we're live every Saturday night, and I do think some fans find themselves in that predicament. The UFC goes live 41 Saturday nights a year for 8 hours. How am I going to be a tried and true boxing fan if I'm committed to the UFC? And that's been my predicament for the last 10 years.
I know that you are studying right now both fighters, but you have a pulse, a sense who's going to win this fight?
So I think it's been interesting to watch the betting line. Obviously, as the guy who's calling the fight, I can't get too predictive for you, but I am not surprised to see money coming in on Terence Crawford and to see that betting line close a little bit. I do think there are parts of this matchup that he can take advantage of, but I think Canelo Álvarez deserves the distinction as the favorite, about 2-1 right now. He's the naturally bigger man. Don't have to tell you about his legacy, but I do think that price is going to continue to tighten as we get closer to closing time, September 13th.
You talk about, you remember covering 2011 way back when. I remember being here in 1972, and when you could get up and down the strip in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Now to have this event, and me watching my hometown blow up for pro sports, to have this event at Allegiant Stadium, the first combat, at what they're calling one of the greatest stadiums in the country. It's not the Mecca.
Yeah,
but,
right.
Your thoughts on that?
Just amazing. And I have never had a chance to work a live event inside Allegiant Stadium, and it's the perfect venue for a fight of this magnitude. And even not to go down the UFC path, but Tom Aspinall has just been anointed our undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. Where is he going to fight for the first time? He should fight here in Las Vegas October 4th, right? I mean, maybe it's going to be Abu Dhabi, but this place holds a special place in my heart. Obviously, I lived here for half a decade, but yeah, to see sort of the worlds collide with the UFC and TKO and boxing, and not be T-Mobile Arena, but the backdrop of Allegiant Stadium, 55,000 strong. I'm just a kid from Boston trying to elevate this live event as best I can, but I can't fucking wait to get there.